of you have told me you've had some issues with getting this intersection accurate. Here you can see that this is pretty darn close on my extra block from the original quilt, as well as that one. But we might have something that looks, let's get that out of the way, like this. If I press this open, you'll be able to see it a little bit better. Sorry, the quality here is not great. I'm doing this on the fly. You can see that that intersection there does not come together. So I'm going to show you a few tricks on how you can correct this. Now, if this block, when I was done with this block, I don't necessarily have to take out the whole seam to correct it. I can try just taking out about 1 inch on each side. But I'm going to show you some pinning things that might help, and some tricks that I do when things don't match. So let's come back to the beginning here. We're going to put our units together. So I just lay it on top, fold this back a little bit, and sort of make sure that they're lined up. Now, what I fold back, I'm starting way back here, but then I'm moving only up here to what's going to be about 1/4 inch. So what I'm finding, most of you are being more successful putting the pin here. So I'm going to have you do that. You'll put a pin at the beginning and end as well. You are welcome to put a pin, and I've done this here because I know many of you were doing it. Go ahead and put a pin in the middle here. So when you go to sew, it will be right down that seam, or right down that 1/4 inch, should correct that. You can also double check by folding this up, and does that match? And it does there. So I'm going to show you something else that might be happening. I think that what's happening is when some of you are coming down here, you're taking your pin out a little too early, which is allowing for this to shift. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to rotate the block, and I'm going to show you when I take out the pin. Actually, I think if I turn it this way, it might make it a little easier for you. So we're sewing. You're sewing down here. And when you get, you can see it with this red pin here, when you get to the point, if you're taking it out back here, there's still room for this to shift. If you take this here, when the feet, the toes actually, are right over the pin, it's holding it in place, it's not going to go anywhere. Go ahead and take that pin out. When you're coming to this intersection, same thing. Come right to here, this intersection is not going to move anymore. So go ahead and take the pin out at that point. Do not run over your pins, and continue on down. Now I will tell you, between here and here, there is this seam underneath. If you need to put a pin in here in order to hold that down, you can do that, or just make sure when you pressed it open, it should be laying flat. But if not, that's okay. So try that. Try making sure that you're not taking your pin out too early. That's another trick that I do. One other thing, I'm coming through here, and if I'm having that issue, that this is shifting, and it's not corrected by the pin location, here's a trick that I will do in intersections like this, or intersections that include points. We don't have it at this point, like star points. We don't have that here, but it's the same concept. What I do is, and I know this is going to seem like extra work, but to me the extra work is worth it if I get good results. Remember, we decreased our stitch length. What I do is I actually baste at the intersection. Can you see that seam? I increase my stitch length. If our default was 2.5, I move this up to about a 3 or 3.5. And I'm doing this to test to see if it is accurate. So I pin as I normally would. I sew just about an inch on each side with that large seam. Then I open this up and see if it's accurate. Now do not be tempted to take your seam or your stitch length too high, because then it's too big and you're not going to get the intersection. So that looks pretty darn good to me. So what I would do now is put this back this way, leave that in there. Do not put a pin back here, and simply sew down if it's correct. Sew right on top of that stitch line that you did before, just like this. I don't know if you can really see how thick this is here. Maybe on the green you can see that that's a double stitch. Obviously, if it's not correct, you're going to take it out, and it's much easier to take out a large seam than it is, a long seam rather, than it is a 2 or even 2.5. This one might be a little easier to show you. I used gray thread. I left the tail in here for you to see. I used gray thread for my basting stitch. You don't have to switch threads, not by at all. I did this for you, but it doesn't really show up. But again, I just sewed right on top of the basting stitch. No need to take it out. It does not, and you can see that ends up being pretty darn nice. And there's no need to worry when you go to press this seam open. It's going to be fine. That extra stitching is not going to affect your pressing or the flatness, if you will. I don't know if that's a word, how flat your seam is going to be. So hopefully some of these tips will help you.